Hey everyone, Brandon from the A-Team. Here's a brief overview of what to expect from the Lightstorm 600D Pro, the flagship light of the Lightstorm lineup and Aputure's brightest light to date. The Lightstorm 600D Pro is a 600-watt single-source daylight balance LED fixture. This means using its Bones accessory mount with a single LED engine, it can produce both crisp, hard shadows, as well as diffused light with soft lighting modifiers, all while maintaining an immense output in a compact design. Saying that the LS600D Pro is bright is an understatement, as it's easily comparable to 1.2K HMIs or Joker 800s. That isn't to say that it's a true replacement, but rather that each of these tools have their own use cases and advantages, and the 600D Pro is undeniably bright. At a distance of 1 meter, the 600D Pro with the 55-degree LS600 series hyperreflector can output over 98,500 lux, or even over 224,000 lux with the F10 Fresnel in 15-degree spot. At a more reasonable distance of 3 meters or roughly 10 feet, the 600D Pro can output 8,500 lux with the hyperreflector, or 29,300 lux with the F10 Fresnel in spot. The LS600D Pro is also the first Aputure light to feature a weather-resistant design, wireless Dmx compatibility, and V and gold mount charging functionality. Now let's start off with the design and build of the light. The Lightstorm 600D Pro is the first Aputure light released with any kind of weather-resistant design. While the 600D Pro is not completely weatherproof and has no official IP rating, we can confidently say that it can withstand some inclement weather, with long-term exposure to rain being completely fine and the ability to withstand heavy rain for 15 to 30-minute periods. With that disclaimer though, we are not liable for any water damage to this light, and in heavy rain scenarios, we do recommend that you cover this light with some sort of rain cover or cello screen. Particularly in heavier rain scenarios, the recommended operating angle of the 600D Pro changes to tilting up 45 degrees or tilting down 45 degrees. This is to avoid any water getting stuck in the water diversion channels and therefore leading to damage to the light. That being said, we have done our very best to seal as many compartments and components of the 600D Pro as possible, including the use of weatherproof head cable connectors. Each of the connection ports on the 600D Pro lamp head and control box also all have rubber caps that can be used to cover each of the ports when not in use, including the head cable port, the Nutric PowerCon AC input port, the 48-volt DC input, the Dmx in and out ports, the Ethernet port, and the USB port. The control box is also designed to be relatively weather resistant, with the lamp head and control box both using weatherproof fans for their active cooling. The LS600D Pro comes standard with our 3-meter long LS600 series weatherproof head cable, as well as our standard 6-meter long Nutric PowerCon True 1 power cable for AC power. Unlike with the 300D Mark II and the 300X, the head cable cannot be daisy chained with another head cable. This is due to the design of the weatherproof connector, so we will also be selling a longer head cable separately. The Lightstorm 600D Pro also features a different Bones mount pin design compared to the 300D Mark II and the 300X. Whereas with those lamp heads you pull the pin back, with this lamp head you push the pin inward, releasing the Bones mount locking mechanism. However, the 600D Pro still does use the same Bones mount accessory system as the LS300D Mark II, the LS300X, and the 120D Mark II, making it compatible with many of the existing accessories in the Aputure lineup, as well as with third-party Bones mount accessories. However, because the 600D Pro uses a large 600-watt COB LED, the 600D Pro can generate a lot of heat, and therefore it's not recommended to be used with all of the same accessories as the other lights. For example, the 600D is not recommended to be used with the Fresnel 2X or the smaller Aputure barn doors, but rather should be used with the F10 Fresnel and the F10 barn doors. As long as the COB has proper ventilation, most accessories will be fine. While we're on the topic of the LS600D Pro's mount, this would be a good time to mention that the LS600D Pro is also the first light to debut with the new LS600 series hyperreflector. As the 600-watt COB LED is larger in size than that of the 120D Mark II and that of the 300D Mark II, we have optimized its hyperreflector for the larger LED surface area, giving the 600D Pro even more punch. You can recognize that a hyperreflector is an LS600 series hyperreflector given by its more faceted interior, meaning there are more bumps and more mirrors on the reflector, as well as the label that will be included on LS600 series hyperreflectors. This LS600D Pro utilizes one larger fan rather than the 300D Mark II's dual fan system. This larger fan pushes a lot of air due to its larger surface area and is able to cool the 600-watt LED engine and still remains relatively quiet, measuring at 29 dBA at at 1 meter compared to the 300D2's 27 dBA. In anticipation of using larger modifiers like the F10 Fresnel and larger softboxes like those from DOP Choice or Chimera, the 600D Pro also features a curved yoke. This curved yoke allows the 600D Pro to increase its tilt angle while still having large modifiers on the front of its Bowens mount. And of course, this curved yoke also features the same handbrake locking system found on lights such as Aputure's Nova P300C with the same beefy handbrake, making sure that it can really clamp down for when it's used with larger modifiers like a 5-foot octabox. The 600D Pro is also the first light in the Lightstorm series to feature the dual junior baby pin found on the spotlight mount and the Nova P300C. This allows the lamp head to be used with smaller baby stands as well as larger junior and combo stands, particularly in use cases when the 600D Pro is used with larger and heavier modifiers. The 600D Pro still maintains a lightweight enough lamp head that we found that maintaining its baby mount would still be useful to many users. In line with traditional HMI and tungsten lamp heads, the 600D Pro is also the first light in the Aputure lineup to include an upgraded cable relief hook, now featuring a rope and carabiner to help with the strain relief of excess lamp head cable. Moving on to the control box, like I mentioned previously, the control box is also relatively weather resistant. The operating temperature of the Lightstorm 600D Pro is the widest of any Aputure light, with an operating range of -20 degrees Celsius to 45 degrees Celsius. Like our other Lightstorm control boxes, the 600D Pro control box also features a heavy-duty paracord strap for carrying it around set. And new to the Lightstorm lineup, the 600D Pro features a more detailed LCD display with an adaptive brightness sensor, meaning it will adjust its brightness according to the ambient light level, much like your phone screen. The 600D Pro also features 4 menu buttons, a sturdy feeling control knob, as well as a new tactile glowing power button that turns green when powered on. And of course, moving to the back of the control box, you'll see Aputure's lightning clamp quick release plate that can quickly attach to the included lightning clamp so it can be mounted onto virtually any lighting stand, truss, or speed rail. The 600D Pro, like the 300D Mark II, also comes with heavy-duty feet on the back of its control box, so it can be rested on the ground when needed. Moving to the side of the 600D Pro control box, you will find next to the Aputure logo an Ethernet port for ArtNet control, as well as a USB port for firmware updates. And on the bottom of the 600D Pro, you will see the Nutric AC power input, the 48V DC 3-pin XLR power input, and the 5-pin DMX in and out ports. The 600D Pro is a device that takes advantage of LED technology and can be powered in a variety of ways. The primary mode of powering the 600D Pro is obviously with the AC power input using the Nutric PowerCon True 1 cable. Next to the AC input is the 48V DC power input, which uses a 3-pin XLR connector. As the 600D Pro has a max power draw of 720 watts, it would require a 48V power source like a block battery or power station that can deliver at least 15 amps of continuous power. Aputure will also be releasing a 4-bay battery power station that can take 4 VR gold mount batteries and output 720 watts of 48V power. On the side of the 600D Pro, you will again see the multi-voltage battery plates. These multi-voltage battery plates can support 14.4, 26, and 28V V and gold mount batteries. At the moment, using 2 of the same voltage batteries, the 600D Pro can be powered up to half power, roughly the power of a 300D Mark II, drawing up to 360 watts. The battery power requirements are different for each voltage, as each battery is required to output at least 180 watts continuously. So for 14.4V batteries, we recommend 15 amps of continuous output. For 26V batteries, we recommend 8.5 amps of continuous output, and for 28.8V batteries, we recommend 7.5 amps of continuous output. At the time of recording, the market for batteries that would be able to fully satisfy the 720 watt power requirements of the 600D Pro to allow it to reach full output using VR gold mount batteries is very limited. However, we do know of at least one company working on a solution. As such, at this time, we have not yet activated the full battery power capabilities in the firmware. If you are watching this after March 2021, this feature may have already been added. Custom battery solutions exist for 48V DC inputs, so as long as these power solutions can deliver a sustained 720 watts, there are currently no limitations on the 3-pin XLR DC input. The 600D Pro also takes a cue from our Amaran line of products that can charge Sony NPF batteries by also being able to charge V and gold mount batteries. Now your LED light can also double as an emergency V or gold mount charger, which is a feature unique to the 600D Pro. As long as the 600D Pro is plugged into AC power, the control box can charge batteries when the light is off, in addition to when it is on, as long as the intensity is below a certain level. The intensity range for charging functionality is dependent on the dimming curve currently being used. With the linear and exponential dimming curves, the 600D Pro can charge batteries if the intensity is below 70%. With the S-curve dimming curve, the limit is 55%, and with the logarithmic dimming curve, the limit is 30%. This limit is the point at which the lamp head is pulling too much power to simultaneously power the light and provide additional power to charging batteries. When the light is off and is actively charging batteries, the LCD will use the full screen to display the battery charging status for each battery plate. When the light is powered on, this information can be seen in the power section of the lighting display mode. The charging status reflects the voltage that the control box is detecting from the batteries, and therefore this method may not always accurately reflect the battery's current state of charge. The 600D Pro, however, does not completely replace a standard camera battery charger. If the voltage of the battery drops below a certain point, the 600D Pro may not recognize the battery and will not charge it. As of recording, the 600D Pro also does not include the ability to wake a battery up from protection mode and is not able to charge all brands of batteries. Certain brands may have specific charging protocols that require a same brand charger, such as modern IDX batteries. In these cases, the 600D Pro cannot charge those batteries as they use proprietary technologies. The control interface for the LS600D Pro is also a first for any Aputure light, using a more detailed LCD screen that can display more information. Underneath the display, there are 4 primary control buttons: the menu button, lighting button, effects button, and the back button. The lighting button can be used to return to the primary lighting control mode. The effects button can be used to enter the lighting effects mode as well as trigger select effects. The menu button accesses the 600D Pro's system menu, and the back button will return to the previous input within the various menus. Beginning with the main lighting mode, the control knob can be used to adjust the 600D Pro's brightness in 0.1% increments. Users can turn the control knob more slowly to adjust the brightness in finer increments, or more quickly to adjust the parameters in larger increments. Pressing the control knob will cause the brightness to jump in 20% increments, cycling between 20, 40, 60, 80, and 100%. The lighting mode displays the intensity of the fixture on the left, the external control method in the upper right, and the selected dimming curve, battery, or AC power status, and the fixture's Bluetooth UID in the right-hand column. Entering the effects mode, the 600D can utilize 8 daylight balanced lighting effects like the 300D Mark II, including paparazzi, fireworks, faulty bulb, lightning, TV, pulsing, strobe, and explosion. In the effects mode interface, users can scroll through each of the different lighting effects. Clicking the control knob will select the lighting effect and allow for frequency adjustments of 1 through 10 and random, and intensity adjustments. The effects mode button also doubles as the trigger button. This can apply to 2 different lighting effects, namely the lightning and explosion effects. When utilizing the lightning effect, pressing and holding the trigger button for 2 seconds will enter cycle mode. When cycle mode is active, the lightning effect will loop at a rate depending on its frequency. Short pressing the trigger button will simulate a one-time lightning strike. When utilizing the explosion effect, the trigger button can be used to quickly trigger a single explosion or several in rapid succession. When the light is powered off and on again, it will retain its last setting, so if it was previously in effects mode, the previous effect will resume. Diving into the system menu, users can adjust Dmx settings, dimming curves, fan mode, studio mode, external control systems, and firmware updates. In Dmx mode, users can adjust the Dmx address and Dmx lost behavior. To change the Dmx address, simply click into the address setting, turn the control knob to find the desired address. To avoid any mishaps on set, the Dmx address can be locked by pressing and holding the control knob for 2 seconds in the Dmx address menu. Press and hold it again for 2 seconds to unlock the screen. As of recording, the Dmx lost behavior can be set to the on or off position. When the Dmx lost behavior is set to on, the 600D Pro will retain its last commands if connected from an active Dmx signal. If the Dmx lost behavior is set to off, the fixture will revert to its previous settings before entering Dmx mode. Toward the end of this video, I will be going over a future firmware update that will bring more advanced Dmx lost behavior controls. Going back to the menu, the 600D Pro can utilize one of 4 different dimming curves: linear, exponential, logarithmic, and S-curve. With the linear dimming curve, the intensity of the fixture varies uniformly with the percentages. With the exponential dimming curve, the intensity of the fixture changes slowly in the lower percentages and then quickly accelerates in the higher percentages. With the logarithmic dimming curve, the intensity variation of the fixture changes quickly in the lower percentages and then decelerates for the higher percentages. And lastly, with the S-curve dimming curve, the intensity of the fixture changes slowly initially, changes quickly in the middle, and then reverts to changing slowly toward the higher percentages. Fan mode controls the active state of the fan. If fan mode is set to on, the active cooling fan in the 600D Pro lamp head and control box will spin at the required rate to maintain a cool temperature. If the internal temperature is high due to high intensity or high ambient temperatures, the fan will spin at a faster rate, and will spin more slowly if the internal temperature is lower. As of recording, if fan mode is set to off, the active cooling fan will remain off. In this case, the 600D Pro lamp head will shut off once the internal temperature reaches the cooling threshold. This mode should be used if absolute silence is necessary, but the lamp's operation periods will not be very long. If you're watching this before March of 2021, this function will be changed in a future firmware update to only output 60 watts when the fan is off, allowing it to maintain longer run times in silent operation. Studio mode is on by default and activates the fixture as soon as it receives power. This is particularly useful for large studio configurations when users turn on and off a master power switch and would prefer not to have to turn each light on individually. If you do not want your lamp head to turn on immediately when you plug it in, simply turn off studio mode. The control system menu allows users to select which of the 600D Pro's 4 external control methods to use: Bluetooth, 2.4 GHz remote control, lumenradio, ArtNet, and Ethernet control. The 600D Pro can only utilize one of these control systems at a time. In Bluetooth mode, you can turn the Bluetooth on and off and perform a Bluetooth reset. This will allow you to connect to the Sidus Link mobile app for your smartphone or tablet, where you can control the intensity and lighting effects wirelessly. In 2.4G mode, you can turn the 2.4G antenna on and off and select the desired channel and group to match up with the remote that comes with the light. Available channels are 1, 2, and 3, and the available groups are A, B, C, and D. You can use the remote to adjust the intensity in all groups or effects controls in groups C and D. In lumenradio mode, you can toggle the Timo2 chip on and off, pair the chip, or update the firmware. In Ethernet or ArtNet mode, you can manually set or automatically obtain the correct local IP, remote IP, and gateway. The MAC address of the fixture is displayed at the bottom of the LCD. The update section of the menu is fairly straightforward and allows users to update the 600D Pro's firmware using the USB port. The update menu also houses a menu option that allows users to view the current firmware version of their lamp head and control box. This menu also displays a note at the bottom of the screen that details the date this firmware version was created, so users can stay up to date. The 600D Pro can also be updated wirelessly using the Sidus Link app. In around March of 2021, the LS600D Pro will be receiving at least 4 feature changes via a firmware update. If you're watching this video after this time, these features may be already available. As mentioned earlier in the video, at the time of recording this user guide, the 600D Pro does not currently have the firmware functionality to allow it to be powered using high voltage, high output V or gold mount batteries that can each output a sustained 360 watt power. After the firmware update estimated for March 2021, the 600D Pro will be able to use these high output batteries, although the options for them are currently very limited. The menu will ask users to confirm that their batteries are capable of outputting the adequate amount of power or risk potential damage otherwise, after which full power capabilities will be unlocked. Users will be asked to go through this process each time the light power cycles for added precaution and to ensure the safety of the batteries and the light fixture. A wake-up function for batteries that have gone to sleep or entered a protection state will also be added. The 600D Pro will also be receiving an update with more advanced DMX loss behavior controls. With these advanced controls, when the control box loses DMX signal, the light can be set to immediately black out, gradually fade to black over 60 seconds, retain its last commands, or hold for 2 minutes and then fade to black over 60 seconds. Lastly, like I mentioned before, the fan mode will be changed to auto and silent. Auto will adjust the fan speed according to the cooling requirements. Silent will force the fan to stop and limit the output of the 600D Pro to 60 watts, maintaining complete silence. Now that we've covered all the features of the light, what does the Pro moniker after LS600D mean? For the LS600D, there are actually 2 versions, the LS600D Pro and the standard LS600D. The standard LS600D strips away more of the advanced features of the 600D Pro in favor of a more streamlined product for users that are used to the controls of the 300D Mark II and don't require wireless DMX or battery charging functionality. The standard LS600D utilizes a very similar lamp head to the 600D Pro without any weather resistance and a control box more in line with the design of the 300D Mark II with an OLED screen and no Ethernet. By removing the weather resistance and advanced DMX features, the standard 600D will be available at a lower price point while focusing on delivering the same brightness. However, no release date is available at the time of recording. And that's pretty much everything you need to know about the Lightstorm 600D Pro, an LED that competes with HMIs.